superstar session follows after next superstar session. Now I have the pleasure to introduce you to two amazing women. I know them for many years. I think it's 15 years or so. And they did great stuff, amazing stuff. Give a warm welcome to Anne Wojcicki. In 2006, 3 years after the first human genome was sequenced, she co-founded 23andMe, and she is still the CEO of it. Her company concentrates on helping people access and understand and benefit from the human genome. And I have so much respect for you, for what you have built. And I have to say I'm a friend of you. I'm very proud of this, too. Kara, also a friend of mine, also a longtime DLD friend, is a journalist. Everyone knows who Kara Swisher is, but I have to read it. Is a journalist and an entrepreneur. She has hosted hundreds of awakening, news-making interviews with prominent figures of the tech industry. She is known as Silicon Valley's most feared, yes, and very much important, well-liked journalist. I'm proud that she's continually returning to DLD. So let's hear what's next in personal genomics. I'm so happy to have you both on the virtual DLD stage. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Steffi. How long do we have? So you don't kick us off like that? Okay. All right. I like that. I love Ben Horowitz being kicked off like that. Who does that to him?
I love to see you get interrupted.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Anyway, welcome, Anne. I'm in DC. Anne is in, I think, Montana.
I'm in Montana.
And we're going to. We wish we were in Germany and going out afterwards for some beer and stuff. But we aren't. But here we are. So let's get into it. Let's start talking about it. I think what I'd love to hear, because I interviewed you, I don't know, 100 DLDs ago. But let's talk about where your company has come, because I want to start with that, and then I want to get into COVID because we have a limited amount of time. But what is happening with the company itself? You're going into a SPAC. Now, everyone has a SPAC these days. You know, Paul Ryan has a SPAC, which makes me worried for SPACs. But talk to me about what you're doing and what you're trying to do with the company, because you're essentially going public.
We are. I had never said, my objective was never about how do I get this company to be public, but really it's about the objective of where are we? What are we accomplishing? And what is it that we want to do? And I really wanted 23andMe to create a new platform for a different kind of healthcare. And frankly, it's something that is driven by your genetics and really puts consumers first. And at the same time, being able to empower those customers to opt into research and really have a different type of research model. And frankly, we're at a point with the company where we've really proven out the model. I have over 10 million customers. I've proven out the research model. I have a major therapeutics program, and we're really ready to scale. And when I think about the future, it's about, having access to capital so that I really can scale the consumer business and the therapeutic side.
Well, one of the things that's been, you and I have talked about a lot, is the difficulty of getting to a business model that works, that you have to not keep getting money for. Talk a little bit about that, because a lot of people who are doing SPACs, the laudable companies that are doing SPACs, are companies that have, whether they're in autonomous cars or they're in areas that are more difficult to move to the public markets. And it takes a long time, the capital required to get them to speed. And also obviously ran into some regulatory issues. There's always funding issues. The business plan's unclear. Talk a little bit about that, these bigger ideas, because I'm thinking about where climate change tech is going, where all kinds of tech that has to do with healthcare is going. And certain healthcare companies do very well, but yours is a very different one. So can you talk a little bit about getting these companies into a stable marketplace in order for them to do their business?
Well, I think, look, the one thing I would take away from my investing days when I used to invest in healthcare companies and especially early stage biotech companies, that there's nothing worse than being too early in the public markets.
Right.
So in some ways, I would encourage companies that don't really have a strong model and are not well validated, that being public is not necessarily the right end goal. And that if you can't raise money as a private company and to prove out, then potentially there's issues. The thing that I really appreciated about the SPAC process is, one, I was eager to partner with Richard Branson. And second, the ability to actually have discussions about the future, where the company is going, is really appropriate for a company like 23andMe, where I have a validated platform. but I have there's a big vision for where it's going, and you have that ability to give that forward guidance as part of a SPAC.
All right. So tell me about that, because you've changed business models a couple of times in terms of figuring out what your business is. Explain what your business is at this moment.
So I would say we've never
commercial. It was commercial consumery. But go ahead.
Well, I would say we haven't changed business models. It looks that way from the outside, but if you look even at my Series A deck, it's always talks specifically about the consumer model and how that's interwoven with research.
Right.
So if you look even at our SPAC documents, which are all public and out there, is we talk specifically about the consumer research flywheel.
Right.
So consumers have the ability to buy the product. They can opt into research. Over 80% of customers opt into research. And then we've been able to crowdsource this incredible community of genetic information, self-reported information, and we use that to make discoveries. So the model has definitely fluctuated over time based on what side is more cash intensive. Right. So when we were really accelerating the growth to 10 million customers, we spent heavily on marketing. Right now, Therapeutics is really taking off. So we've definitely had to emphasize the cash going towards those therapeutic programs.
So talk about that. Talk about the therapeutics business. And then I do want to get into sort of your role in COVID and healthcare moving forward. Because one of the things I just interviewed one of the doctors who was involved in early mRNA research, and they said there's a lot of COVID learnings happening right now for other things, for other diseases. So talk a little bit about what your business in therapeutics is, and then what you're doing around COVID.
Well, what's interesting, part of the reason why I was attracted to therapeutics is I think that there's a way to really have a more efficient discovery engine. And there's a lot of research that shows if you start with human genetic information, you are more than twice as likely to be successful. And the problem right now in drug discovery is over 90% of everything fails.
Right.
So anything that you're going to do to prevent failures is going to have a huge impact. So starting with human genetic information gives us a huge edge. And what we have by having the kind of size the size and scale that we have now is we have insights into human biology that no one else has. And so because of that, we have an incredible opportunity to really develop novel therapeutics that can have a huge impact. So in 2018, we did a big partnership with GSK. They put a lot of money into the company, and we have 50-50 development programs. So we now have our first program that's in humans, and we have over 30 programs behind that.
This is for testing on what things, on what diseases?
Well, the first one that we've announced is in immuno-oncology. And so that one.
So explain how that works. So explain for people to understand what that entails when you're doing this.
You mean what part? The discovery process, or the
yes, exactly. What you're doing with the company.
So what we do is what's interesting is when you look at the genetics, you can see that there's different mutations, and those different mutations are going to impact the function. So you really go from one of the things that becomes very manual is going from the gene to the function. So what you can see, there's an example, for instance, there's a well-known drug it's called PCSK9. And what they did is they found people who had a genetic mutation who had really low LDL. And what you do is you can by understanding those genetics, you can say, well, what's actually happening in the biology? And then can we potentially mimic it? Is there an antibody you could put out? Is there a small molecule? So you get first that insight from the genetics. And then you have to figure out, well, what exactly is that causing in the biology of the human? And can you then copy that in some way?
When you're thinking about doing this, what you're doing, what is the goal here for 23andMe as a business? What is the consumer part of the goal?
Well, the consumer side is really interesting. So if you think back on 2003, when the first human genome was sequenced, and Francis Collins came out with a huge hoopla and said, the potential of human genetic information is to really transform the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of all disease. And I think everyone that you talk to is going to say at some point, genetic information should be part of your medical record. It should be integrated with your healthcare. Like no one disagrees with that. But if you think about, it's been 20 years since that first genome came out.
Absolutely.
And think about the healthcare system as it has not adopted genetics.
Right.
Like I find that fascinating. But the reason why it has not adopted it is in part because genetics gives you really the potential to prevent. And prevention is largely just not a main part of the healthcare system.
Right.
And so part of what I think we're really trying to introduce is a way that people can know their fundamental biology, like understand your genome, and then understand, are there things you can now do to prevent? Are there things you can do to better manage your care if you do get sick? And really integrate that. So what I see 23andMe, the role that we're doing with the consumer is to usher in true personalized healthcare.
Right.
And what I see as a disappointment is that 20 years since the human genome, the only place you see genetics broadly used really is in prenatal testing, and even there it's sparse, and in cancer. And there I'd say it's also still relatively
So let's dig into that a little bit, because it's one of the things you and I have talked about. Oh, that's okay.
Sorry, that's just my son telling me that he's skied a mountain.
Okay, good. Good job. Good job.
Good job, Benji.
He's predisposed to being a good skier, I suspect. So when you're talking about that idea of personalized treatment, why, when you say it was because treatment is not looked at, like early understanding it, and treatment is more focused in on, meaning they make money from giving you a drug, right? From solving a problem or cleaning up. COVID feels a little like that. Like it's something that came later, although the swiftness of these vaccines is really fascinating.
It's amazing.
Studied for years. So let's talk about that idea of sort of the disease comes and then we clean it up. That's sort of the same thing that's happening in climate change, where carbon capture is focused on, and not, efficient energy and clean energy or things like that. So talk about that idea of how you get to a non-reactive way to deal with diseases. And then I'd love you to talk about sort of your thoughts on where we are with COVID.
Well, what's interesting to me is if you look at something like type 2 diabetes, which is largely preventable,
right?
That if you become diabetic, there's all kinds of ways you can monetize health. Like actually last time you interviewed me, I remember talking at South by Southwest, and we gave this example of like in type 2 diabetes, the whole food chain, all the different companies that make money on it. Right. But if you never become diabetic, so for instance, if you are healthy at 100, no one in the healthcare system makes money on you.
Right.
And that to me is fundamentally where the incentives of the system are just wrong. Like it's just not aligned with what's in your best interest. And that's the hard thing. That's the area that we're trying to pioneer. And I would say fundamentally, if you talk to most physicians, like your brother is a physician, and most physicians don't believe that individuals can change their behavior.
Right.
And I would say that there's two things that are controversial about 23andMe with the medical community. First, we're trying to show that healthcare does not have to be predicated on a one-to-one interaction with a physician, that you can actually deliver healthcare at scale, like through tech. And second is that people, if they're given the right tools, actually can change their behavior and do things to mitigate disease risk.
Right.
So those are the two areas that we're really making a big bet, is that there's an opportunity to really give people specific information about them and then try and prevent disease.
So give them the tools. I mean, we talked about this, at a phone that would tell you shouldn't have eaten that donut this morning, and now you should stop and eat this instead, which will mitigate what's happening. So when we're thinking about something like, I want to get into COVID in a minute. When you're doing that, how do you then push back at that? Because it requires a wholesale rethinking of the whole system. And of course, during COVID, we've all sort of relied on the medical system to say,
well, COVID has really opened up doors.
Yes.
And in some ways,
talk about those. What are the learnings from it?
I think what's so interesting is that what was so hard is 23andMe really had to take genetics, and we took it from the world of weird into the world of wonderful. And virtual care and primary care is kind of in that same state. Like people thought that virtual care was kind of weird pre-COVID, but it's become mainstream now. And so that's part of like the big shift for us, is there's actually an opportunity now to really introduce virtual primary care, like a genetics-based virtual primary care, because it's not seen as so weird anymore. Right. And what I find is I have 10 million customers who are now super interested in doing more with their genetics. And there's real ways that we can actually take the genetic information and help create personalized plans for people. Right. And if you think about the world that's come up with all your wearables, like I love my sleep score every day. And I love seeing how much I've exercised. Right. So that information, though, is really useful, but it's not, the raw data itself is not
actionable.
Useful.
It's not actionable.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I think what's actionable is the delta. Like if I suddenly saw that you didn't sleep well for 6 weeks, then I could flag something. I'd say, Kara, what's going on? Like, hey, let's evaluate your lifestyle. I mean, one of the things that everyone talks about in healthcare is the social determinants of health, like living with stairs, how you eat, whether or not you changed your commute to work, like all those things have a big influence. So being able to take more of that, for like the virtual care experience is much more aligned with that. And that's part of what we think about is how do I actually use your wearable, your lifestyle information, and actually really help you then use that to prevent.
So when you're thinking about that idea of people getting used to telehealth, I think you're right. I think there's certain things like telecommuting. People sort of like, even though they complain about Zoom, I think there's gonna be a lot fewer people at work. They like the flexibility of a workplace. So you can see massive changes there. Teleschool, not so much. None of us like it, right? No matter where you are on the economic chain, it sucks for everybody, for every parent at least. So it's not good. It's not good. And it's hard to imagine ways to make it good. But telehealth is something that is much different. So how do you get to that idea using what you guys do, genetic information, to do so? And what do you imagine, we only have a few minutes, but what do you needs to push through post-COVID in order to do that? People are now used to it, just like they're used to telework and things like that. So what has to happen, do you think?
Well, I think what we're really focused on and what is that service that we're going to build that gives our customers a platform to, access primary care and to to have true personalized care. So, how is it that, sometimes you need a physician, sometimes you need, a medical professional, sometimes you need chatbots, sometimes you just need, insights on your information, you need a, reminder. So I think that there's a whole experience that we're looking at creating that's really going to say, how do we leverage your genetic information and try to make you healthier? But I think it's something, the reality is like, it's something that's never been done.
Right.
And that's what's fun is like for us to create, like one thing the company has done really well is we keep innovating. Right. And we keep saying like everything that we do is grounded in genetics. And how do you actually, ultimately use your genetic information for, again, the benefit of drug discovery or the benefit of keeping you healthier?
So last time, I'm going to finish up, we talked about privacy, of how you do this. Where are we with this idea? Because as these things do move, and I think you're right, people thought telehealth was weird and now it's acceptable. I've done most of my medical stuff telehealth and it works just fine. For most things, instead of just calling, say, Dr. Google on certain things, that's why I say someone's typing in and coming up with him. So what do you imagine the privacy issues we need to deal with going forward? Because this is something you've been concerned about, and a lot of people have as they move into this arena. Privacy
is so interesting to me because I think it's in the early days when we started 23andMe, and it was Brad Templeton at EFF who sat us down and he said, listen, privacy is so misunderstood. It's really the important thing with privacy is giving people transparency and choice.
Yes.
And that's really what we have always defined ourselves as. Like, if you want to learn about your genetics, learn about it. If you want the breast cancer results, we don't force that on you. Like that's another opt-in. And if you want to participate in research, but then also give people the opportunity to opt out. Like for instance, when we signed our GSK partnership, we proactively emailed all of our customers with the link to say, do you want to opt in or do you want to opt out? Like for me, I never want my customers to feel like they did not understand the choices they made. And so we've always tried to say like everything about this should be about choice and transparency. And I think one thing that always aggravates me when I go to Stanford, I go to any other medical facility, I don't have choice. I don't have transparency. Like where does your health information go?
And Stephanie, I'm going to ask one more. I know that. Can I ask her one more quick question? What is the one thing you think is going to come out of COVID? That's the most important health-related thing?
I think you're going to get regulatory reform. I think you'll get reform with the FDA, and I think you're going to get reform for virtual care. I mean, as is like right now, there was all those issues about telemedicine and whether or not you're licensed in all 50 states, and like I think everything, even virtual clinical trials. I think all of that, the regulatory is the number one thing that is going to come out of the COVID side. It will absolutely change drug discovery and it will change the practice of virtual care.
Great. Perfect.
Thank you so much. This is you two smart women. I love you. It's amazing what you do and how you do an interview, Kara. I can learn from you so much. And if I see it correctly, we had a good outlook in the future of medicine combined with the genetic information. Thank you so much for it. I'm hoping that we will see us in a couple of years again on this, and you will tell us about the outcome of the SPAC.
Stephanie, we can do another spit party.
Yeah.
We can do a German spit party.
Yes, we do a German spit party. We always wanted to do. I was envying the New York spit party. Was, you know, what's the fashion designer was wonderful. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I read about it in Vanity Fair. It was so cool. It was so lifestyleic, but nothing happened then in Germany. We have to do it.
Stephanie, let me just add one thing. Anne, my brother, my sons found their sisters via 23andMe thing.
Wow.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Anne.
I have to hear more about that.
I'll talk about it when I see you. We had a spit party. Okay, thanks.
Let's see us soon, wherever and whenever. Ciao.